Sathiya, it's so good to see you and to talk to you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Nice to reconnect here after a couple of years.
I know it's been a while, so it's good to talk to you again and catch up on the work that you're doing. And before we dive into a lot of the work that you're doing with Deep Clean, which is a system, a program that you've developed for men who are dealing with pornography addiction, and they're just ready to kick that habit out of their life. We're going to get into all of that, but before we talk about that, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Why is this something that you're even passionate about?
Yeah, not necessarily the career path I had in mind as a little boy,
Sure.
Trey. I had other ambitions like being a pizza delivery guy. I had set the bar pretty high back in the day. No, I mean my story starts as an 11-year-old boy in the computer lab of my Christian school. That's where I was first exposed to pornography. Buddy came up and said, "Hey, check out this website." Back when the internet was really the wild, wild west, very unregulated, innocent sounding site, and I didn't become a predator and a hopeless addict overnight. It just planted a seed like it does for most people. It kind of sparked some curiosity. And so by the time I was in high school, I was watching pornography regularly, kind of because everybody was doing it and it didn't seem like a big deal. It was relatively harmless. And, this is, I mean, we're talking now, I guess, about 20 years ago. So also the way you accessed it was very different. There was a family computer. It had to be certain times of the day. The barrier to entry
Yeah.
was higher. But by the time I was in university, I had my own devices then at that point, and really pornography was a daily thing, and it was the only way I knew to cope with the pressures at university. I was very high achieving academically, very involved in volunteering and working, and 5 figures in research grants as an undergrad and all that kind of stuff. And porn was kind of the only reward I got. I felt like everything else, you're going to get rewarded later once you finish your degree, once you finish your research, whatever. But porn was kind of that instant reward, and that's really that was the pinnacle of it. That was the crux of my struggle. And I knew one day I would quit, and that day came because eventually I did commit my life to Jesus. I grew up in the church as a pastor's kid and everything else, but when I committed my life to Jesus, I knew it was time to quit. And I think that's when I realized how badly I was actually struggling. I kind of just figured one day I'd make the decision, I'd quit cold turkey, I'd be good to go. And I was not good to go. I went a few days and I'd come back into it. And then I thought, okay, I just need to kind of tighten things up a little bit, muster up a little bit more willpower, throw up a couple prayers. I'm sure we'll be good to go. And that didn't work. And so I started to look for solutions. And I found that most of the solutions out there were get an internet filter, pray the prayers, get deliverance ministry, maybe if that's your theological bend, talk to your pastor, get an accountability group. There was good advice out there, but none of it really seemed to work for me. I did all of it. And 3 years into trying to quit pornography, I was still stuck. And at this point I was
Yeah.
really on fire for the Lord. And, I was actually feeling a call to ministry myself. I was going to become a 4th-generation pastor, and I was trying to reconcile all this. Like, how am I going to step into ministry, but I'm still struggling here? And I just didn't ever find the solutions I was really looking for. I had to go piecemeal things together. I had to kind of go to some unusual paths. And so I always purpose in my heart, hey, if I can actually figure this out and really quit pornography, I'll do everything in my power to help other guys walk in freedom as well. And so I had my last relapse February 2016. That's the name of my book. That's why we connected in February. And it was actually February 2022 when we connected, because I had launched the book then. And December 2018 is when I launched Deep Clean. I waited a couple of years. I really wanted to kind of get a release from the Lord to make sure that I was in a good enough place to kind of handle a ministry like this. And so that's kind of how it all came to be.
So tell us a little bit about that faith journey when you realized, okay, I grew up in a Christian home, and you even mentioned you were a multi-generational ministry family. You came
Yes.
from a legacy of pastors. And still, even though you grew up in a Christian home, you went to Christian schools, you were inculcated in a believing culture. This was still something that gripped you, right? Pornography was still something that got a hold of you. And I think that often that is a shock. I was looking at some statistics before we talked, and I think it's somewhere around 75% of kids ages 13 to 17 are exposed to pornography, and that didn't shock me that much. Unfortunately it's all over Instagram and Twitter or X, and you can get it anywhere as long as you've got a device.
Yeah.
But then what did shock me is another survey taken around the same time found that 75% of parents, roughly, believe that their kids don't deal with or have never seen pornography. It's like, that is not the case. Like, there's no way that that's the case. Unfortunately, like there are
Yeah.
some who get out unscathed, but they're few and far between. So, anyway, that was a long question or a long setup. But my question is, when did you realize, like, okay, this is a huge issue that is much deeper than just I like looking at this for the arousal factor?
Well, I would say I pieced that together over a couple of years. I think
Yeah.
personally, I realized, though I still remember the first time, and this is a long story, but I'll keep it very short. But I was struggling. I was hitting my head against the wall. I've committed my life to Jesus. I want to serve Him. I want to get rid of pornography, and I can't. And I was praying one day. I was going for a drive at night, just like, Holy Spirit, just help me. Like, what am I doing wrong? Or what do I need to do? And I really felt like God was saying, you need to talk to your friend Keith. You need to tell somebody about it. And he was the first of what probably wound up being a couple dozen people that I would have these conversations with every once in a while when it was appropriate. And the response every single time back was, me too. Either
Hmm.
currently struggling or I've been there. So that was my first inclination of, okay, I'm definitely not as alone as I thought I was. There's a lot more people struggling. And then, to be honest, when I started Deep Clean, you know, everyone kind of said, "Oh, good luck, man." It was like they wished me the best, but I think nobody really thought I'd be able to build any kind of decent organization, I guess you could say, around this subject because it's so taboo and no one wants to talk about it. But I mean, on Instagram, I have over 100,000 followers on Instagram. That I don't mean that in a bragging kind of way. I just mean there's a lot of people who are like, "Hey, I see the message and I need the help," and they're resonating with it. The podcast has grown a lot for us. We've had just a lot of growth. That, to me, that's been the biggest indicator of, okay, even now in the masses, like, you don't have to know me personally. People are just looking for a story they resonate with, somebody who gets it, somebody who can talk at their level, and somebody who can say, hey, I know how shameful this can be, but healing is possible, freedom is possible, and let me show you how to do it. So, yeah, it's just become more confirmed over time.
Yeah. So for you personally, did that spiritual transformation of realizing, okay, I need to have a real relationship with Jesus, did that come before or after, I guess, your struggle with pornography beginning?
Yeah, I came before. I mentioned I have a pretty heavy research background. So I was in a
Yeah.
very atheistic environment in my early 20s, everybody kind of laughing at the idea of God. And that's what forced me to explore, okay, yeah, wait a minute. How do I know God is real? And why do I believe what
Hmm.
I believe? And out of all of that, I committed my life to Jesus. And there were things in my life, I would say prior to that point, I was living 1 foot in and 1 foot
Yeah.
out. Getting drunk with my friends on the weekends, not greatest language, watching pornography, but, involved in the worship team and reading my Bible pretty regularly and going to youth group or Bible study or young adults or whatever it was. So I knew when I actually committed my life to Jesus for real, like, God, He made Himself real to me. I want to commit my life to Him, make Him my Lord and Savior. I knew that I had to clean a bunch of this stuff up because I had the Christian education and I grew up in a pastor's home, and I knew what I was capable of. It wasn't even about what was right or wrong. I just knew what I was capable of. And so, I could quit the drinking, no problem. That was pretty much an overnight thing. Cleaned up my language, maybe took a couple of weeks. And I knew I needed to quit pornography. And I think that was that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to honor the Lord and I wanted to live with integrity. And I didn't really like the feeling of having it in my life anyways. I just don't think I had a good enough reason to get it out. And committing my life to Jesus was the reason. And that's what kind of started this whole journey.
Hmm. So talk about, because I know for a lot of people, the most difficult, or at least one of the most difficult things, is finally admitting it to yourself and then admitting it to somebody else that pornography is something that you deal with. Because,
Yeah.
as you said, that's such a huge taboo, and it's like, who wants to be the guy to admit, like, when I'm at home by myself in the dark, I'm watching this? I mean, nobody wants to have that conversation. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
you said, Keith was the first of several friends that you ultimately opened up to. Walk us through that first conversation. What was it that kind of gave you the courage and the tenacity to say, okay, I need to admit this issue to somebody?
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say I was just a really humble dude and I knew I needed to get help. um, the honest truth is, I'm the classic self starter. I was so convinced I was going to figure this out on my own, and then I would tell people. That was kind of how I justified it. People always say, you need to talk to other people. You need to have brothers in your life, and da da da. And I thought, yeah, that's great. I'm gonna invite them in and tell them about how I overcame pornography, past tense, once I figure this thing out. But it was just realizing I have done everything I could on my own, and look where it got me. Nowhere. Watching pornography maybe once a week instead of once a day. Like that's not the freedom that I'm reading about in the Bible. So I think it was just realizing I've hit a wall here. I'm not doing what I know I should be doing. And I was at that point, I was just willing to do whatever. And that's why I was praying, like, God, whatever it is I need to do, like, I will do it. So when it came time to tell Keith, I mean, Keith was a good friend. We were hanging out regularly. He had been through some difficult seasons. And so there was a degree of transparency on his part already, probably more so than there was on mine. So I think I was fortunate to have a relationship like that. And that's one thing I always say to guys, if they're like, hey, that sounds nice in theory to tell someone, but I don't know who I could tell without being judged, or the only person I could tell is my spouse. So I always just say, who's the person that you could tell anything and they would look at you the same? Maybe that's your grandma. I don't know. I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully that's not the person you have that conversation with. But, for me, it was Keith. Keith was the person that I just knew I could have that conversation with. And I don't know what I said. I don't really even remember how I said it. It was probably super awkward and super sloppy the way it all came out. But I think the biggest thing is the biggest thing I see guys miss on this is we really try to use flowery language or try to dress it up instead of just calling it what it is. And so we say, I'm kind of struggling with lust, and I'm navigating a really difficult, we use we pull out all the Christianese to like soften the blow a little bit. And if I could give myself credit for anything, the one thing that I did just outright is I said, dude, I'm watching pornography, and I'm watching it way more than I'd be proud to admit, kind of thing. And I think naming it for what it was actually gave me a lot of power over it. And again, it's not like that I wasn't healed overnight because I did that, but it certainly gave me like okay, I've named it. It's out there. Somebody else knows about it. And like I said, it was met with a lot of grace, and I was very fortunate that way. So that's kind of how it started. I got a little bit better at having those conversations as time went on, but that was the early days.
Well, one encouraging thing about the statistics regarding pornography, because I've been on both ends of that conversation. I've been you in the conversation, and I've been Keith in the conversation with other people who have kind of shared these things with me. And one piece of information that is really encouraging is when you look at the statistics, unfortunately, 80% of men in the United States admit to using pornography. The number is probably higher than that. It's just that's 80% are willing to admit, right, that they're using pornography. I've seen some authors joke like 80% of men look at pornography and 20% are lying about it. So,
yeah, pretty much.
But the encouraging thing is when you're on the receiving end of that conversation, often it's like, yeah, okay. Like, all right, I've been there too. Let's talk about it. So I think, I have a friend who had talked to a counselor about the issues he was dealing with. And one disarming thing the counselor told him is, so you're not unique. Like you and everybody else is dealing with this. And that was kind of like, wow, okay. So it's not as huge of it. It's a big issue, but it's not as insurmountable of an issue that I have made it up to be in my mind when I've dealt with it in isolation. When you bring in other people, that is like we were talking just before we started recording, and that is like the fuel for the fire that really gets it going when you add other people into your community to help you walk through something. And it's what scripture says, right? That we should confess our sins one to another. And there's freedom that comes in confession. That cheesy cliche that sunlight is the best disinfectant really is true. So talk about that shift in your life when you finally started acknowledging, okay, this is a monster in my life that I want to slay. Talk about that shift when you finally did acknowledge it and you revealed it to people in your life. What changed in your success in overcoming it?
Yeah, so there's kind of a struggle before a triumph. Keith and I started to have more regular conversations about it. And then we had the great idea to do it like the kind of internet filter accountability report system together. So you install the thing on your device, It tracks any websites you go to, it forms a report, and then it sends a report to the other person. So this is where I think I have a little bit of a rub with internet filters. No, they don't all operate this way anymore. But at the time, we kind of became the blind leading the blind, because we both were struggling and we're both getting reports. We're basically getting a list of, hey, here's links to a bunch of adult content sites. And so eventually we're both starting to stumble off of each other's reports, which is
Yeah.
super embarrassing to admit, but that's what was happening. And so I think I realized, okay, the confession part was good. It was healing. And it definitely helped me take that first step of, all right, I'm not going to figure this out alone, and that's okay. I think when I reached my limit in this arrangement with Keith, what I realized is I needed people, I needed more than just one person. I actually needed like brotherhood. And I was kind of sick and tired of like the, hey man, did you stumble this week conversation. It didn't really seem to be leading anywhere fruitful. So what I experienced, and this was probably about 2 or 3 years later, is I was actually at a ministry school, and so I'm studying now to become a pastor because, like I said, I felt a call to ministry, and I had 3 roommates, and the 4 of us over not even that long of a span of time became really good friends, and every single day it felt like, or at least a couple times a week, we were just having really meaningful conversations about our struggles, imposter syndrome, being in ministry or getting ready to
Yeah.
be in ministry. Part of the school kind of focused on healing from, wounds of your past. And so we were talking about stuff we dealt with as kids. And occasionally we would talk about struggles with pornography and stuff, but it wasn't even the focus of the conversation. We were really just meaningfully opening up to each other and building that camaraderie. And that's where I realized the power of community, because we're linking arms together. We're getting to know each other. We're having meaningful conversations. We do talk about our struggles with sexual sin, but it's kind of one piece of the pie. And there's a lot of other things going on. And in the process of just building meaningful connections, my own lust and my own appetite for those kinds of things just started to decline. We have a little saying in our community: a satisfied heart rarely wanders. And that was the case for me, just in the process of building meaningful connection with those brothers, but also with God, because I was having incredible spiritual development in that season. And between all the connection I was forming and the community that was being built around it, my heart really started to shift. And I would say that's where I kind of took a bit of a quantum leap in my recovery and in quitting it for good.
Yeah. So, okay, you mentioned the recovery, the filtering apps, I guess not recovery apps, but filter apps that are on your phone. And I think a lot of times people start to use those things and you've mentioned earlier, just all these different things that people start doing. And it's like, okay, they're just looking for something to grab a hold of that'll give them any modicum of success. So you kind of start grasping at straws, and it's like, okay, I'll try this. I'll try this. I'll try this. And you end up trying 14 different things. And you spread yourself so thin. And really, I think so much of it is about creating that brotherhood, or if you're a woman listening, that sisterhood with other trusted women who can come around you and help build that that resilience to push out something from your life that you no longer want. But my question I want to ask is, I think that those filtering apps can still be really useful. I don't think that they're always a bad thing if you've got them coupled with that community, because I've always seen filtering apps like Covenant Eyes, or I know there's a bunch of others out there, but that's just the big one that I always think of. They're kind of like, it's a speed bump, right? It's like, okay, this is every time that you come up against something, because there's a way around every single filtering app that exists. Anybody who's dealt with pornography can attest to that if you really want something, you can find a way around it. But they're speed bumps, right? It's like, this is an opportunity for you to slow down. Here's another opportunity for you to slow down. And every time you go over that bump, it gives you just one more chance. Like it's one more exit route. And if you keep going, it's going to do damage to your car. Just like if you kept going at full speed over 18 speed bumps, that's going to cause some damage to your car. Not a perfect analogy, but I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So I basically categorize solutions into two quantities.
Okay.
One is external measures. And so that would be an internet filter. That would be habit hacking, habit stacking. That would be your nighttime routines, how you manage devices. That sort of thing, something we talk about on our podcast a lot, actually, because it's one of the easiest ways to just get momentum going is to just charge your phone outside of your bedroom.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
91% of porn viewership happens on the phone. The most popular time to view pornography is 10 o'clock at night, between 10 and midnight. So charge your phone outside your bedroom. You'd be amazed what happens. So that kind of stuff, right? I would say that should be about 20% of the equation for you, the
Hmm.
external measures. And 80% should be more the internal measures, which is community, getting to the roots, trauma healing and recovery, focusing on your identity, emotional awareness, those kinds of things, a little bit more intangible. I think that's where people get the most results. But the internet filter can serve as an excellent kind of safe fall, and we've had a
Sure.
couple of clients who have said, man, I was having a really weak moment. I'm not proud to admit that I made the decision to watch, but my filter stopped me. And it was just enough to make me realize what I was doing, and I didn't watch porn tonight.
Yeah. It just
You know,
snaps you out of it.
it snaps you out of it. And so I think when it's done with the right mixture, the right proportions, it can actually be really effective. I just think too many people actually ironically from the programming of viewing pornography, which is I can get my reward instantly, I can get my pleasure quick. We kind of transfer that same mindset into recovery, and we say, perfect, I'm going to pay $20 a
Hmm.
month, slap on an internet filter. Great, that feels amazing. I did something productive and it's going to be helpful. And then we kind of just dust our hands off and figure everything else should be good to go. And that story just doesn't exist. There's nobody who did that and successfully quit pornography, because generally there's a lot more going on at a heart level that also needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I heard you making that on your podcast, Man Within, on an episode I was listening to recently, and I had never thought about it that way, and I've never really heard anybody else talking about it that way. That pornography wires your brain for instant gratification and instant satisfaction. Obviously, it's short-lived, it's fleeting, and it's hollow,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives you what you're wanting in the moment. And your comment about, like, I just want a quick fix to get me out of this pornography addiction, that is a mentality that's been reinforced because of your addiction to pornography.
The
So
irony.
yeah,
Yep.
unpack that a little bit, because I think that's fascinating and not something that a lot of people who work in your realm have said, at least not that I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, the question we get asked maybe the most is, how long does it take to quit? Because people are trying to size up, right? It's like, okay, I know I'm struggling, and if you could just tell me in like 90 days I could have this thing fully fixed, I think maybe I would make the leap. That's kind of how we sort of make the decision, and that's where the rationale is. And basically, what we're saying is, and usually what people are actually asking out of pain. So their pornography addiction has finally caught up to them in their marriage. The amount of clients we have now that are losing jobs because they're watching pornography at work is very high. So something really bad has happened, and I want the pain to go away as quickly as possible. And I know I can't keep going to pornography. That's what I've been doing. So can you help me quit pornography as quickly as possible so that
Yeah.
I can feel good again, right? And kind of feel
Yeah.
back to normal. So it's the same programming. It's the same parts of our brain. Now, as a coach and as somebody that's built a lot of course material for guys struggling in this area, initially I was so resistant to it that I was like, no, we're gonna play a long game, and we still do play the long game. But I was so focused on trying to change people's minds that we would actually lose our clients. Because if you start something, you make the brave decision to actually get some help, to do a program like ours or join a community like ours or whatever it is, or it could be anything for anyone. But you make the decision to do something, maybe you put some money into it. The last thing you want to hear is, this could take 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if that is true, people, we're not going to chase after a bus if we miss the bus by 10 minutes. But if I
Right.
missed it by 10 seconds, I might sprint for a little bit and see if I can grab its attention. So when you're going into recovery, you actually do need, or not even just recovery, we don't even need to use that language, but if you're just trying to quit sexual sin, you need to know that it's possible. And you do actually need some quick results or some ideas of like, okay, I can do this and it is possible. And so that's baked into our communities. It's baked into everything that people do with us, because you have to kind of get that early momentum. And in some ways, yeah, we are feeding a little bit of the porn brain that wants the quick results. But what happens is, as people start to get into the community, like we talked about earlier, people start to get so much value from the community that they don't care how long it takes, because they have the brotherhood, they're connecting in a meaningful way, they're starting to tackle the hard issues. And the question of how long will it take starts to disappear after a while. But initially, yeah, you do need to see some results. And my preference is that people would see results at more of a heart level than just slapping on the internet filter, because
Yeah.
the internet filter, it's very easy to just be a one and done. You install it and then you walk away. Whereas I feel like if we can help you get some quick wins at more of a heart level, you kind of realize like, hey, there's actually more here and I can keep going. And it's really
Yeah.
good for building momentum.
Well, and a lot of times those short-term victories are they're it's not that they're bad. It's good to see, quick change and success, but a
Yeah.
lot of times that's symptom management, right? Because
Yes.
pornography addiction is a symptom of another issue. So, talk about some of that and some of the deeper rooted issues that you saw in your own life, and since you've started deep clean and the work that you've been doing with that, some of the other issues that you're like, okay, you thought that you were just dealing with sexual desire, right? But
Mhm.
actually, that's like just a third level symptom of another deeper heart issue, that your spiritual issue that you've been grappling with.
Yeah, it's funny. They did a study. It's called a multivariate analysis, where they kind of compare a bunch of different variables with one behavior or one outcome. So they did this for viewing pornography. They found that the behavior, or sorry, not the behavior, the variable that was the greatest predictor of whether or not somebody would watch pornography was meaning in life. Did they have meaning in
Hmm.
life? And so I think the interesting thing is, well, obviously, so the more that people have meaning in life, the less likely they are to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think what it tells me is how often we just miss the mark because we think pornography is a sexual issue and it's only for pedophiles and perverts, when in reality it could just be a guy who's got no purpose in life. He just hasn't figured out what that thing is yet, and so he's feeling void and he's feeling a bit numb, and he uses pornography to cope with it. So I think that's why we do people such a disservice when we just say pray more or ask the Holy Spirit to give you self-control. I mean, I would suggest doing both those things. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying that Proverbs 4:23 says, "Guard your heart above all else, for from it flow the issues of life." And so, what are we doing to actually get to the heart of the issue? We all know nobody asks, "Hey, when did you give your mind to Jesus?" It's when did you give your heart, right? This is a heart. It's a
Hmm.
heart journey. Our journey
Right.
with Jesus, and the whole gospel is about transformation of the heart. So it makes sense that if we were living with sexual sin and sexual immorality, that we would probably need a change at a heart level to actually see something change there as well. So for us, I mean, I've had this messaging for a long time, but the last couple of years, I've realized that most root issues that people have happen in one of three categories. It's either emotional immaturity, trauma, or core identity or core lies that they're believing. So that's literally the deep clean system. Whether you're in our community or coaching or whatever you get from us, the system will always revolve around these three concepts of let's build self-awareness, let's build emotional health, let's address anything from childhood or any kind of trauma that might be there that's contributing, and identity. The identity piece is a really big one because especially in addiction circles, there's a lot of adages like once an addict, always an addict. I interviewed on a very reputable addiction podcast, and the guy was reading my bio, and he read Sathiya Sam is a recovered pornography addict, and he actually stopped the interview and he said, "You know what? I actually don't believe that. I don't believe you can be recovered. I believe everyone's in recovery, like ongoing." This
Hmm.
is the kind of philosophies that exist. So a lot of believers, unfortunately, are kind of wrapped up in this as well. Like, I'm once a sinner, always a sinner. I'm just always going to be stuck with this. So being able to transfer people's identity to something that's actually gospel and biblically based, really, really important. So, anyways, to answer your question, when we're tackling root issues, it's usually one of those three categories.
Yeah. Okay. So now, Deep Clean, that's a recovery program that you created. Obviously, we've been talking about it a little bit here and there, and you've seen more than 1,000 guys receive freedom from pornography going through this system, and you're launching a new iteration of Deep Clean called Inner Circle.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about that and how it's different from the program that you currently offer.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've done an article or two recently about AI.
Yeah.
It's becoming a big thing. We kind of know we're on the verge of a mega shift in our society with
Yeah.
the AI revolution. I think in this space of what we're discussing, it's already happening, with AI girlfriends and AI being able to generate basically any kind of piece of content that you would want. So it's already a problem. But the thing that I'm realizing is going back to what we were talking about earlier, there's a scripture, Proverbs 28:13 says, he who conceals his sins will not prosper. Man who conceals his sins will not prosper. But if he confesses and forsakes them, he will find mercy. And
Mm.
what God has really put on my heart is to try to create safe spaces where guys can get authentic interaction with other people so that they can confess and forsake their sins, so that they would have mercy, find mercy, but also so that they would prosper. And so Inner Circle is really a community-based brotherhood of men from around the world pursuing integrity, pursuing freedom, and trying to find their purpose in life at a deeper level. And it's got kind of all the same components. We would never offer something that didn't have, coaching,
Yeah.
high quality course material, and a communal element. But the real emphasis of Inner Circle is community. That's what we want people to really plug into, because I believe with the AI revolution, it's going to be harder and harder to figure out when you're getting, like, when someone posts a piece of content, was that AI or was that the individual? It's going to be harder and harder to really get meaningful community-based interactions online. And so all of our communities are built on a private network. It's completely separate from social media, because I just think that's where the real value is going to be in the future. And I think for guys who are serious about walking in integrity and freedom, these are the kinds of places they should be plugging into, because it's where they're going to get the best outcomes. And with Inner Circle, what's unique is, we have a coaching practice where we've helped over 1,000 guys specifically just through the coaching practice alone. Not everybody can afford coaching, so we can appreciate that. Inner Circle is available for less than $2 a day, and you get coaching
Mm.
from me, my team of coaches, plus great course material and this really, really premium brotherhood. So that's what Inner Circle is about. And my real prayer and hope is that it just provides more men of God to really find a place where they can find healing, find hope, and step into their purpose.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to mention too, right now, for anybody who's listening and you're on Spotify or iTunes, we'll have links to all of this in the show notes so that you can check out Deep Clean and Deep Clean Inner Circle and all of Sathiya's his book, his podcast, all of that. We'll have those links in the show notes. Sathiya, one thing that it's just sad to see that this is something that's had pornography has had such a huge grip on our culture. So products like Deep Clean and Deep Clean Inner Circle, I think, are so necessary because you have to create another culture, right? You can't just pull out bad habit out and not replace it with a good habit or replace it with a good behavior, because nature abhors a vacuum, right? It's going to fill it with something, and often it's going to fill it with what was previously in there. So if you stay away from pornography for 2 weeks, but you don't have any sort of robust community that you're starting to build, unfortunately, statistically, most likely you're going to fall right back into that. Can God miraculously deliver somebody? Absolutely. But
Yes.
9 times out of 10, he wants to use the body of Christ, right? He wants to use community, other believers, other brothers to come alongside you and kick this sin, whatever it is, whatever the sexual sin might be. But I want to ask you kind of an abstract, overarching question. Why do you think pornography has become such a pervasive issue in our culture today, specifically with our men?
Oh man, loaded question. I interviewed a former OnlyFans recruiter named Victoria Sinis on my podcast.
Hmm.
So she would manage OnlyFans models and help them get more leads through, and then manage the clients that were there. And I asked her a very similar question. I said, what was required? Because OnlyFans was very chat driven. So I said, what was required in the chats to keep people engaged and to keep people coming back? Because obviously
Yeah.
that's the whole model, right? What were you guys capitalizing on? And she said, oh, that's easy. She said, curiosity. She
Hmm.
said, men are inherently curious. And all we needed to do was tap into their curiosity, whether it was kind of getting their imagination going or however we piqued their curiosity. She said, if we had their curiosity, we had their money, we had their attention, we had everything that we kind of needed from them. So I think pornography is incredibly captivating. And I think it evokes something that is inherently masculine, which is curiosity, to want to know more. And pornography is endless. There's always more of it. There's always ways to escalate it. There's brain science behind that. Our brains get desensitized by porn, and we need more to watch it to get the hit. But I think at its core, it's actually tapping into our curiosity, our God-given curiosity. And I think that's why guys keep coming back again and again. And I think the other big thing is that men are lonely.
Hmm.
And we have thousands of connections online. We work on a team with other people in our jobs. There's no shortage of people around us, but we don't know how to actually experience meaningful connection. And again, that's all the more reason to have communities or have safe places where you can be talking and having the conversations, because I think otherwise we're prone to something, whether it's pornography or it's alcohol or it's eating or whatever it might be. But I think pornography in particular is just it's so stimulating, it's so scintillating that we're going to come back again and again more times than not.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a reference that I know my wife will be proud of. So her favorite novel is The Book Thief. I don't know if you've read that, Sathiya, but
I
it's
haven't.
so I've been reading it, and um, uh, it's written from the perspective of death. It takes place during Nazi Germany. It's a novel,
Okay.
and it's narrated by Death, who's watching over these several different characters and kind of narrating what he's witnessing. And it's a scene in the story when Hitler Youth are marching through this town in Germany, and they have a book burning ceremony, and everybody is moving toward this book burning ceremony, and it's people who were opposed to it initially, and they all of a sudden get caught up in it. And even though some of them are still like, I think this is wrong, they still want to watch it. And then as they're watching it, they get kind of excited and ginned up over it. And Death says, wow, their greatest skill, humans, is escalating.
Mm,
And I was like, wow, that really hit me. Like, we are really good at escalating. And he was saying
mm,
that escalation causes all kinds of damage that they just don't even think about because they're just so caught up in escalating whatever it is
mm,
that they're doing. And yeah, I think that even in this conversation, that's so pertinent, right? We want more. We constantly want and crave more. So as Christians, we know that we're created as image bearers, right? We have innate value and worth, and looking at anybody lustfully is a sin, right? You've committed adultery in your heart when you're looking lustfully, but we constantly just keep going back to it. It's like, oh, that's really arousing to me.
mm.
Even not just sexually, it's intellectually stimulating. It's like, oh, it fills that curiosity gap that you were talking about. So, but for somebody who said, well, it's not harming anybody. I'm even a single guy. Like, what's the issue with me watching pornography? Explain why, as Christians, you just can't make a good case for escalating that kind of behavior.
I think Paul said it best in 1 Corinthians 6. He who sins sexually sins against his own body. And so it doesn't matter if it's not affecting anyone else, it's affecting you. And
Yeah.
that's reason enough. You're made in God's image. You're part of the body of Christ. And so that means we all suffer together, we all rejoice together, and we all heal together. And I think when you do harm to your body, yeah, you're affecting everyone within you. And
Mm.
I'll maybe paint this a little bit more definitively. The rate of erectile dysfunction for men under the age of 40 these days is reported to be about 33%. Men that are
Wow.
experiencing erectile dysfunction in some capacity. In 2001, it was only 5%. Just to give you an idea, it's over 6x in the last little bit because of this escalation, right? Because the threshold for arousal is now so high that real person experiences are
It's just
not
not
cutting it.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't compare to the hyper-produced content that we're used to viewing online. So for the single guy who doesn't think it affects anyone, it's actually affecting you now, but it's going to affect your loved ones later. And even
Yeah.
if you don't experience ED, maybe it's just the emotional disconnect, but one way or the other, they'll be affected. The other angle to this that doesn't come up all the time in my conversations, but it's very, very much appropriate, is sex trafficking.
Mm.
And anybody who's done research on sex trafficking, like the guys at Exodus Cry or Lila McCallway, any of these people, they will all tell you that pornography is simply the marketing department for sex
Sure.
traffickers.
Yeah.
And so even just by giving the attention, they capitalize on that attention and it fuels more sex trafficking. It fuels their pockets and allows them to make more content. Any kind of partnership on any kind of level is going to have some sort of effect on the world in a negative way. And it's easy when you're in the darkness of your room on your phone late at night to think, this just affects me. What's the big deal? These people probably want it to be on the screen anyways. Rarely the case. And what you don't realize is they're monetizing your attention and they're making a killing off of it. So there's a lot more going on than what meets the eye.
Yeah. Well, in the last few minutes, Sathiya, I just want to ask you just a couple candid questions that I know that I've had these conversations with friends, right? And I think that it's something that our audience would benefit from, which is, okay, what if you're a husband and wife, and I know that there's this huge push for quote unquote ethical porn, right? Whatever that is. I mean,
Yeah.
but people are able to be convinced by, oh, what this is ethical. It's two people who are consenting. They wanted to do it. They're in a committed relationship to each other. And
Yeah.
what's wrong with my wife and I, my husband and I? We just want to sit down and we use pornography as part of our sexual expression with each other.
Hmm. Well, the first thing I would ask is, would you snort ethical cocaine?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like the ethically sourced thing is just, it's kind of a moot point.
Hmm.
Sin is sin, pornography is pornography. I think for couples that are watching pornography together and trying to figure out why that would be wrong, if we go back to Jesus's words in Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "He who looks at a woman with lustful intent has committed adultery in her heart." So there's not really any blurred lines biblically about third parties. Generally, third parties should not be involved in a marriage. It's meant to be between a consenting husband and wife. That's healthy sexual intimacy. Anything outside of that is a violation of the biblical standard. So when a couple is choosing to watch pornography, you're inviting another party into your sexual relationship. But if we
Yeah.
take this a step further, because there's some data that suggests, when couples watch pornography together, they report better, higher degrees of satisfaction in their sex life and relationship. But if you follow any of those studies over longer periods of time, there's always a plummet. Initially, there's a spike because of the novelty. The novelty is enhancing and it makes it more pleasurable. And this is so exciting and there's a thrill to it. But what happens with time is, well, surprise, surprise, the person gets programmed to get arousal from somebody other than their partner. And so what happens when somebody has a sexual urge, but they're disconnected because they just had a fight? The pornography is
Yeah.
there. And so gradually you start to build this sexual bond with something other than your wife, which is completely anti-biblical. So I don't think there's anything healthy about it. I don't think there's any safe amount or safe measure. And I think from a biblical standpoint, scripture is pretty clear. Healthy sexual interactions happen between a consenting husband and wife, nothing else.
Yeah. So then, okay, next question. What about somebody who's like, well, I'm not going to look at pornography because that's an issue. I agree with you 100%, but I'm okay with masturbating. And even I can make the case I'm okay with masturbating because I can do it with we'll say without lusting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's keeping those temptations tamped down, right? It's keeping those sexual urges at bay. When I masturbate and I have that release, then I'm less likely to go on my phone or my tablet and look up pornography.
So let's work with our same definition from before, right? The Bible warns us about sexual immorality, right? We are to avoid sexual immorality. Sometimes the easier way to understand this is by redefining the opposite. Sorry, not redefining, but defining the opposite, which is sexual morality. Sexual morality biblically involves two primary things. Number one, a covenant of marriage between a husband and wife, and number two, consent. So these are the two qualities that we look for to define something as sexually immoral or moral. So watching pornography is sexually immoral because the interaction is not between a husband and wife. There's another party, and then there's obviously a consent piece there as well, and that's a completely different conversation. When it comes to masturbation, you could make an argument that there's consent because I want to do it and I'm doing it. So okay, I'll give you that. You can check that box. But at its core, masturbation is solo intimacy. It's fundamentally a biblical oxymoron because there is no sexual interaction between a husband and a wife. Now, a third layer to this is because then the rebuttal is, well, what if while I'm masturbating, I fantasize about my wife? But the problem with that is you're now making an object of your wife. And so it doesn't matter if it's your wife or it's a porn actress. If you're objectifying somebody for your own personal individual pleasure, it just doesn't fall within the biblical lines of something that's sexually moral. So that's why masturbation is not just, I used to say masturbation isn't best practice because biblically it doesn't say masturbation is wrong. But I just have such a conviction now of the Holy Spirit that no, masturbation is a sin. And I think the other thing you mentioned, like assuming that there isn't fantasy, because some guys will make that argument like, oh, I can do it without fantasizing. Um, I do believe there is a contingent of the population that can do that. I believe it's probably less than 5%. I think most people are
Right. Yeah.
lying. Most people, they're doing it from a place of there's some sort of fantasy, there's some sort of chase there. And for the 5% who can do it, you still shouldn't do it because it's solo intimacy. It's not actually a sexual experience between your husband, or between husband and wife rather.
Yeah. Okay. And then my last kind of candid question for you is, okay, let's say somebody's fully on board with everything that you've just said, whether it's about masturbation or about pornography, but they realize that, okay, pornography is something that I've been dealing with now for several weeks or months or, years, whatever it is. And they're to the point where they've disclosed it to a trusted friend or community of brothers, but now they've got to tell their wife. How do you start that conversation? And I know that's a loaded question, but I know that is just such an intimidating thing to do.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on this for
Yeah.
sure. So number one, if you're ready to tell your wife, well done, because unfortunately a lot of guys don't do that and they get caught. And when you get caught, things are a lot worse. So I think if you're ready to have the conversation, I say kudos to you. My biggest recommendation would be to go slowly. So as in you wanna let them know what's going on, but sometimes guys, they say everything, they just kind of spill it all out and they verbally vomit on their spouse, and they walk away feeling amazing because they finally got something off their chest, but your wife is covered in vomit.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is go slow, and then number two is tell the truth. So you don't sugarcoat things. It can't just be like, hey, I've been struggling with lust, or I've watched a little bit of pornography here or there. I've been watching pornography sometimes daily. I haven't told you. It's been going on throughout our entire marriage. Like you have to be direct about what's going on. So those are my two biggest pieces of advice up front: is go slowly, tell the truth. But probably my third piece of advice, and maybe the most important piece of advice, is this is not a one-off conversation. This is an ongoing discussion. There's no such thing as you tell your wife and then you're good to go. Anybody who says that will have a fraction of intimacy in their marriage that they could. Because the reality is, your wife is going to have questions. She may not have questions right away because she might be a little bit shocked. She might want
Yeah.
time to process it. But the more this can be an ongoing conversation where she can come back, she can ask for clarity, you can keep the ball rolling, the more likely you are to actually have a healthy conversation about it and for this to actually lead to something beneficial for your relationship. And the last thing I would say is my biggest recommendation is that you actually talk to somebody else about it first, who can help you just kind of clarify your story and make sure that you're getting clarity on all of that. You can even hit me up on Instagram if you want. I'd be happy to help people with that, or you can write into our podcast, Man Within. We field all the questions that come through there, and we answer a lot of them online. So anything I can do to help, I'd be happy to. But I think those would be my top pieces of advice, at least to get started.
Yeah. Well, I know I threw a few pretty big questions for you there right at the end of our time, but
I like that. That was good.
yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on those things. And we're coming up against the end of our time here. So, Sathiya, for people who want to know more about the work that you do, they want to connect with you, or maybe they want to enroll in Deep Clean or Deep Clean Inner Circle, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, deepcleancoaching.com. That's the best place to learn about Inner Circle, and we highly recommend everybody kind of starts out there. And if you want some more insights, maybe there's something that Trey didn't ask me in his spicy rapid fire questions at the end there. Over 1,000 episodes on the Man Within podcast.
Yeah.
And I can pretty much guarantee we've done something on what you're wondering about. So you can go do a search there as well in your directory. It's available where all major podcasts are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Man Within really is a great resource because you really do not shy away from anything, which I think is so important and refreshing because it's like, okay, pornography is a pretty explicit thing, obviously by nature. So it leads to some pretty candid questions that we all have for anybody who's dealt with it. So having access to that is a great resource. So thank you for all that you do in this realm because it's so important. So I appreciate, Sathiya, you coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great.